Thank you for joining us for this month's virtual Curators Tour. I'm Jenna Gilly, Associate Curator of Exhibitions at the Fort Wayne Museum of Art, and I'll be your guide today. We will be looking at the exhibition Miró in New York, 1947, Miró, Hayter, and Atelier 17, organized by Dolan Maxwell Art Gallery. Catalan Surrealist painter Joan Miró made his first trip to the U.S. in 1947 after receiving a commission for a mural at the Terrace Plaza Hotel in Cincinnati. During his 9-month stay, Miró worked out of a friend's New York studio. While in the city, he requested Stanley William Hayter's legendary printmaking workshop, Atelier 17, where Miró created a small group of experimental prints. At this time, New York was host to a group of immigrant artists who first started arriving in the 1930s, fleeing Europe in the wake of advancing German forces. Atelier 17 became an exciting meeting place where both émigrés and young American artists shared ideas about modernism and revolutionized printmaking. Working in an environment that fostered innovation and collaboration, they practiced the use of unpremeditated or automatic drawing and pioneered new techniques in engraving, etching, and screenprinting. This exhibition focuses on the year 1947, capturing the extraordinary confluence of Miró's stay in New York, Hayter's Atelier 17, and the collective of artists that formed around them. Before we jump into Miró, let's begin talking about the print studio of Atelier 17 and its founder, British artist Stanley William Hayter. Atelier 17 was opened in 1927. Its name derived from its street address, 17 Rue Campagne Premier, Paris. As Germany invaded Western Europe in 1940, Hayter and his wife Helen Phillips, also an artist, fled to New York, where they reopened the printmaking workshop. The timing was impeccable. Hayter was charismatic and inspiring, bringing cutting-edge perspectives on art. Already familiar with his Paris workshop, Hayter's exiled friends flocked to Atelier 17's new venue in search of camaraderie. Young American artists eager to meet the European artist whose modernist styles broke with tradition also convened on the studio. Their approach was an alternative to the more conservative trends in American printmaking, which centered around the turn-of-the-century etching revival and social realism. This print, titled Falling Figure by Stanley Hayter, showcases the artist's innovative approach to printmaking. A figure, outlined in red, has been captured in a state of falling, arms thrown wildly into the air with a grimacing expression. The figure is of a nude woman, identified by her bared breasts. Yet, unlike in the history of art, Hayter has chosen to focus on the woman's expression and movement rather than her physical beauty. The woman's body, composed of looping lines and simplified shapes, has been situated on a colorful, non-distinctive background with equally abstract organic forms. Hayter seems to have been inspired by the modernist movement of the early 20th century, especially Cubism. Cutting-edge work like this aimed to challenge what art was supposed to depict, which typically was static, beautiful images. It would be instrumental in placing New York on the map as an international art hub and developing the future of modern American art. Next, we will discuss a work by who likely drew you to this show, and that is Joan Miró. Along with Pablo Picasso and Piet Mondrian, Joan Miró was considered one of the most revered European modernist masters by the New York avant-garde in the 1940s. Although his career had not taken off in Spain, his reputation grew in the U.S. through several exhibitions at the Museum of Modern Art and the showing of his seminal Constellations at the Pierre Matisse Gallery in 1945. Miró's sojourn in New York was from February to October 1947. He divided his time between painting his commissioned large-scale mural and deepening his interest in printmaking at Atelier 17. He enjoyed experimenting in etching relief, printing on plaster, and cutting through the copper plate matrix. Although his experiences with the medium were intermittent before 1947, printmaking evolved into an important part of Miró's oeuvre, totaling over 2,000 prints during his lifetime. Previously, in the 1920s, Miró made a dramatic leap from representational painting to a melding of figuration, abstraction, and the fantastic. Biomorphic forms resulted, suggesting creatures, stars, personal signs, and symbols. In a 1948 interview, the artist explained, "For me, a form is never something abstract. It is always a man, a bird, or something else. For me, painting is never form for form's sake." We can see this philosophy in Petite fille sautant à la corde, Femme, oiseau, little girl jumping rope, women, birds. Childlike drawings of several figures are interwoven between free-flowing lines. A few stars are also scattered about. Miró's ability to give content to abstraction appealed to emerging American artists who sought a universal illustrative language imbued with meaning. His free-floating forms, curvilinear lines, and treatment of the pictorial space as field were an alternative to the tight geometric compositions of Picasso and Mondrian. His childlike and spontaneous approach to art was part of an attempt to assassinate traditional painting, or make it less bourgeois, and more accessible to all. In addition to modernist art, Miró and the other members of Atelier 17 were also interested in the incorporation of poetry into their works, particularly the writings of the 18th century artist and poet William Blake. Blake was known for decorating the pages of his work with colorful illustrations and fluid text that didn't look printed, adding whimsy and another dimension to its meaning, much like illuminated manuscripts in the medieval period. Using a transfer method, the group incorporated script into their artwork, which could be written normally and imitate Blake's fluid writing style. Here, in An Alien World from the Ruth Van Todd portfolio, Scottish poet and William Blake scholar Ruth Van Todd collaborated with Miró to create this print. Miró's childlike scribbles reference specific lines of the poem. For example, the first sentence of the second stanza, "Only the sudden shiver of her darling eye suggests that clattering strangeness is around," likely inspired the yellow image in the upper right, which features a pair of large eyes with spiraling pupils. While open in New York, Atelier 17 attracted nearly 100 women artists. The studio was a critical, professional resource at a time when female artists were largely overlooked, had few career options, and had limited opportunities for growth and development after graduation. Alice Trumbull Mason was one of such artists who benefited from the openness of Atelier 17. She came from an artistic family, descending from American painter John Trumbull. At the National Academy of Design, she studied with Charles Hawthorne, and at the Grand Central School of Art with Arshile Gorky, who introduced her to Cubism and Vasily Kandinsky's work. Committed to non-objective art, Mason was a founding member of American Abstract Artists Group, formed in 1936. In 1944, Mason joined Atelier 17. Her studio was next door to Joan Miró's during her stay. After her move away from biomorphic forms, she began creating architectural abstractions, demonstrating her admiration for the strict geometry of Piet Mondrian, who came to New York in 1940. In white scaffolding, Mason impressed loose weave fabrics in the soft ground-covered coppered plate. When pulled away, the textile's pattern is left on exposed metal that was etched. The print reveals a range in tonalities and textures from the various weaves and seams. In a 1964 interview, she stated, "Abstract art demands an awareness of the intrinsic use of materials and a fuller employment of these means, which build a new imaginative world by using them for their own potential worth." Other women in the workshop layered and imprinted gauzes, lace, and nylon hosiery in soft ground to create veiled forms in abstract compositions. Essentially, these were collages in print form. A readily available fabric in the print shop would have been tarlatan, similar to the tight weave of cheesecloth used to wipe off ink from the plate. Critics, however, showed gender bias and diminished their modernist approach to using textiles, historically connected with women's work. Another female artist who was completing groundbreaking work at Atelier 17 was Terry Haas. Born in Czechoslovakia, Terezi Goldmanova's family fled to Paris with rising anti-Semitism in 1938. After the city's invasion, they left again, this time to southern France, finally arriving in New York in 1941. Marrying Walter Haas, the artist adopted the professional name Terry Haas. Haas took classes at the Art Students League before finding Atelier 17 in 1947. In 1951, she briefly served as director of Atelier 17 when Stanley William Hayter returned to Paris. Whether using the scorper or printing in plaster, Atelier 17 artists explored the sculptural elements in their two-dimensional works. Traditionally, in intaglio, the artist incisors lines, but the copper plate remains intact. In Listening Figure, Haas has cut the copper plate to the shape of a figure, possibly in profile. When pressed, an indentation is left surrounding the print, adding another textural dimension to the work. Additionally, she soldered a piece of wire to the plate's surface. The delicate engraved lines contrast in fineness and in physical height with the strident mark left by the wire. Thank you for joining me for this virtual curator's tour. To see many more fascinating works by Miró and the many other talented artists of Atelier 17, I encourage you to see Miró in New York, 1947, Miró, Hayter, and Atelier 17 in person before it closes on June 25th.